We are in the Gospel of Matthew. We did the Gospel of Matthew all through the fall, and we're now doing Easter according to Matthew. We are about to finish the Gospel of Matthew today, and then Easter Sunday will be the last message in Matthew. And we're going to see a number of things, connections to the Old Testament. We've seen a number of connections to Exodus, which we looked at previously in the winter. And as we go through today, after the Gospel of Matthew, we're going to jump into the book of Acts. That will be for the spring, and that's going to be an amazing thing to see how the church is supposed to live today in this world. We always start a message with an illustration, and this illustration is going to be tailored toward helping us understand how the world has changed because of Jesus. Okay, first of all, ancient animal sacrifice. This is my illustration. Yeah, it doesn't sound like something you would love to learn about. We're not going to learn about details of ancient animal sacrifice. You may know a lot of the parts in the Old Testament, and a lot of the parts that we skipped, actually. We didn't get to the second half of the book of Exodus in our series. A lot of that is about animal sacrifice and how to do it. And there's a little bit about why, but really not actually that much about why. Just sort of the basic idea that animal sacrifice, somehow the blood is going to deal with sin in some way. Now, ancient animal sacrifice was not just something practiced by the Israelites. It was practiced by the Israelites. This is sort of an artist's depiction of the courtyard of the temple where they would have an altar, they would sacrifice the animals in a particular way, and then they would burn them. Burn certain pieces, eat certain pieces. There was a whole ritual involved with it. But animal sacrifice in the ancient world was everywhere. Everywhere. Check this out. I mean, we talked a lot in our series on Exodus about the Egyptians, right? This is an ancient depiction of Egyptians sacrificing an ox at some festival. They sacrificed animals all the time. This is, does anybody know what this one is? Who wore those funny hats in the ancient world? If you know your ancient Near East really well, those are Babylonian hats. Yeah, that's what the Babylonians wore. Crazy. Maybe we should try to bring that style back. What do you think? Maybe not. Wouldn't go over so well. But there they are, sacrificing an animal, right? Okay, you think, all right, this is all from the same region, though, right? This is the ancient Near East, okay? Yeah, but even move further, move into Europe a little bit. Here's a depiction of ancient Greeks sacrificing. Okay, yeah, you knew Greeks sacrificed animals, okay? Here's a picture of animal sacrifice, or not an actual picture, but animal sacrifice also occurred in Africa, still occurs in Africa in some places. Everywhere in Africa, not just up in the north in Egypt, sub-Saharan Africa as well. Okay? Also, North Americans, indigenous North Americans and South Americans. We'll get to that in a minute. Animal sacrifice, virtually every tribe did this. And the only reason I say virtually is because we don't know. But finding people groups in the ancient world that did not practice animal sacrifice is pretty much impossible. It's pretty much impossible. South America, and in fact, in many places in the world, including South America, this went even further than animal sacrifice, right? They did sacrifice many animals, but this also went over into human sacrifice on a huge scale. And then even Asia, right? I mean, we don't have time to go through all the details, but it is worldwide, okay? So if we were to say ancient animal sacrifice, and we're going to say sort of what percentage do, historians estimate, this was everywhere. The percentage in the world was 100%. We could just essentially say it was 100% as far as we know. Now, what I want you to do for a minute in this illustration is think about that. That means it wasn't just a trend. It wasn't just a custom. It wasn't just a tradition. It was every single one of all of our ancestors, no matter where they were in the world, all felt in a very deep way something is wrong, and the only way to fix it somehow, something is wrong between us and heaven. And the only way it can be fixed, if it can be fixed, it's going to require blood. Every single one of our ancestors just knew that deep down. It was part of the world they lived in, even though they didn't learn it from anyone. They didn't learn it. Yes, in each culture they learned it growing up, but it couldn't have shown up everywhere in the world unless it was showing up independently. Now, does anyone have that sense today? How many people do you know who feel like deep down people feel something is really wrong? Yes. You could say that's almost universal. But how many people do you know feel like, we just really need to go sacrifice some animals? So I did a little AI research to figure out, so it was 100% in the ancient world. What is it now? What about now? What percentage of the world has animal sacrifice in their daily life? 0.4%. And that is not spread out evenly, right? That's particular places where there's a really strong tradition. So essentially, almost the entire world has no animal sacrifice in their lives at all. So the question is, what in the world changed? What happened? How can it be that people who lived thousands of years ago, universally, every single person, just like every single person, what are some things we share today? Every single person on earth has, unless they press this down, has a deep sense that, murdering other people is wrong, okay? That kind of a sense, everyone in the world felt like animal sacrifice has to happen. Blood must be shed to fix what's wrong. And now no one feels that way. What happened? Something major changed in the entire human race. And here's the point. Jesus happened. And he happened not just to Christians. He happened to everyone, even if they don't know it. He happened to the whole world. I think that is stunning. And it makes me want to pray that the whole world will open its eyes to what has actually happened, because much more can happen than just this change. The whole world doesn't feel like, at least naturally, like God is an oppressor who's going to come destroy them anymore. That's because we live in a different era, an era of grace, because Jesus happened. Wow. Let's jump into the Gospel of Matthew here. And today we're looking at the story of the Garden of Gethsemane. And actually what we're going to do today, this is a little bit different. We're going to look at a part of the Old Testament, and we're going to look at part of the Gospel of Matthew. So we are going to look at Matthew chapter 26, which is where you'll find the story of the Garden of Gethsemane. So this is after Jesus on the night he was about to be arrested. And he knew he was going to be arrested. He was going to be betrayed by one of his closest friends, Judas. And then the authorities were going to arrest him. He knew he would suffer, and then he would be crucified. He knew all of that was coming. And he had the Last Supper with them, and that's the same thing we're going to celebrate on Wednesday if you come to Threefold Communion. He had a meal with them. He washed their feet. He talked about what was going to happen in the future at that meal, and then that's where he initiated the bread and the cup, right? He said, this is my body that's broken for you. This is my blood shed for you. So all of that happened, and then after that, he took them up on a mountain, just like last week we looked at him praying on a mountain, right? And he did this all the time. He did this all the time. This is how Jesus set time apart and made himself holy, made himself dedicated to his Father in heaven. He would go up on a mountain or a hill, and he would pray. And so he went up on this hill in Jerusalem, the Mount of Olives. It's not actually that big. The Garden Gethsemane on the Mountain of Olives, and he prayed. And we're going to look at what happens there. But we are also going to look today, we're going to start to look at Psalm 22. And Psalm 22, we're going to look at today and next week, because the way that Matthew tells the story of Jesus being arrested and then suffering and being crucified and coming back to life, Matthew tells it connected to and within the structure of Psalm 22. I told you a few weeks ago, it's almost like Jesus sometimes speaks in Bible code. It's almost like he knew the Bible so well that he'll say things that only people who really have studied the Scripture for many years would even understand what he's saying. And we mentioned the example, right? When he's dying on the cross, what does Jesus say when he's dying on the cross? He says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Right? And it sounds like he's in despair, and he is suffering intensely. But he is quoting Psalm 22 in that moment. And as we'll see next week, Psalm 22 ends with the Messiah rising from the dead and the entire world turning back to God. So it looks like Jesus is saying, all hope is lost, God has abandoned me, and really he's saying, have faith in God, I'm coming back, and the whole world's going to turn to him. Exactly the opposite of what you would think. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to look at Psalm 22. We're going to look at the first half of it, which is the despair half. And we're going to I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I use that psalm. I've been sending it out to you as a devotional guide, some pieces from that psalm. It sounds like some of you have been using that. I would encourage you to look at some of that psalm this week. And I'll show you how I use that psalm in my life to bring my own pain to God. We all have a lot of pain and struggle in this life. And what we're supposed to do with that is bring it to God. And that's what Jesus does in the garden. So then, after we look at Psalm 22, we'll also point out some places where it connects to the story of Jesus. Then we'll look at Jesus himself praying in the garden and how he exemplified this. He brought his own pain to his Father in heaven. Okay? So let's take a look at that. All right. So, title of the message today is The King Forsaken and Psalm 22. And we'll call this first half of Psalm 22 especially the cry for help. The cry for help. Psalm 22 is one of these interesting places. It is a prophecy. It's written by King David, and so it was written, something like 1,000 years before Jesus. And originally, it's written as David was probably singing, right? He was probably playing worship songs on his guitar or something kind of like a guitar back then. And David would do this often, and this is how many prophets in the ancient world did. They would sing a song that was really about them at first, but then somehow, as the Spirit led them through that psalm, they would start to say things that could not possibly be about themselves. And so there's this kind of mixture of, it's about David, but it also becomes about someone who's coming in the future, who's going to change everything. This prophecy. So it begins like this, and this is, of course, the part that Jesus quotes. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries of anguish? Now, even that opening line, you might have the question in your mind, is this, the person writing this, do they really have faith? Does God ever forsake us? What's the answer to that? No, he does not. He says he will never leave you or forsake you. And yet, David, as he writes this, David who knows that the Lord will not forsake him, he's asking this question. Why? Because that's how he feels in that moment. And this is a huge part of the point today, even right from the first verse, okay? You're going to go through life. This faith, following Jesus and having faith does not look like I'm just always happy all the time, or even I'm just always confident all the time that God is going to be there for me. It looks like this, right? Because this is how human life always looks, up and down. And there will be many moments in your life when you feel like I've been crying out to God, I've been asking him to help me with this situation. He should help me with this situation. He said he's going to be there for me, and he's not there. He just doesn't answer. And that's how this psalm begins. That's how Jesus is even approaching his Father in heaven on the cross, in some sense. My God, why have you forsaken me? When you feel like that, you are supposed to bring it to God. You're supposed to bring it to him and, in a sense, go after him, almost like you're mad at him. Maybe even you are mad at him. This is the pattern we see in the Psalms, and it's an essential part of worship. If you don't bring your real self to God, you will not be able to enter into true worship. You will not meet with God in a deep enough way to really see that he's there. You have to bring your real stuff, your real garbage to him. He continues, and he just kind of builds this idea up. My God, I'm crying out to you all day long, but you're not answering. In fact, I don't even sleep. I wake up in the middle of the night. I can't sleep because of this thing that you've allowed to happen in my life. I find no rest. I cry out to you again and again, but you don't answer. You can see in the beginning, the psalmist then, David, wrestles back and forth with what he knows to be true about God and what he's experiencing right now. He's experiencing that God is silent. And yet, he knows that God's in control. But you are enthroned as the Holy One. You are the one Israel praises. I know that you're God. I know you're the Lord. So why do I feel like this when I know that you are the God who's in control? Our ancestors put their trust in you. They trusted and you delivered them. Have you ever felt like that? I have people ask me this question. We don't even have a big church. And I think I probably, on average, have people ask me this question every single week. Why did God do all this stuff for other people but not for me? Why did God do all this stuff back in Bible days but not now? Why does God seem to work in other people's lives around me but he never talks to me? Every single week somebody asks me that question. You're supposed to bring that question to God. That's what David's asking here. David, who defeated Goliath, he's asking this question. Our ancestors trusted you like they went through the Red Sea. That sort of trust. That's what he's talking about. You delivered them. You did all these miracles back in the olden days. They cried out to you and were saved. They trusted in you and were not put to shame. And then he goes really deep here. And this might be hard to understand a little bit, but look at the depths of his pain and the way he's bringing this to God. I'm a worm. I'm not even a man. I'm scorned by everyone, and everyone around me despises me. You can think of some clear times in David's life where this was pretty true. He was on the run for his life at different points. But you can also think of times in your life when, even if this wasn't fully true, you felt like this. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. And then he wrestles with the fact that he has put his trust in God, and everyone around him knows that, and yet it looks like God is not coming through for him. He wrestles, I think, with the temptation here to abandon his faith. Have you ever wrestled with that thought? Maybe if I just, instead of going after God and going after all this church stuff, maybe if I'd just gone after money like everybody else, or just gone in a different direction, maybe then my life would have been better than it is with the Lord. Every believer experiences this kind of a temptation. And here's David saying it right here. They say of him, he trusts in the Lord. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him since he delights in him. So everybody's making fun of him because he's put his hope in the Lord, and it appears that he's been abandoned. And this is exactly what's going to happen to Jesus in the most dramatic fashion on the cross. It's going to appear like his entire life has been a worthless failure. And he's going to have to trust his Father right through that. Of course, Jesus will walk through it without hesitation, without much hesitation. He remembers, again, the wrestling back and forth. He remembers things that God has done for him in the past. You brought me out of the womb. You made me trust in you, even at my mother's breast. I think there's an idea here of David saying that in some sense he feels like God brought him to faith. It was his choice to follow. We always have choice, but in some sense, do you feel this way? Like your life has been led by God? Like he brought you to this point where you gave your life to him. Not like you really went and sought him out at the beginning. He sought you out. From birth I was cast upon you. From my mother's womb you have been my God. And then he begins to cry to God for help. Do not be far from me, for trouble is near, and there is no one to help. He paints a vivid picture. We'll go through some of this a little bit faster. He paints a vivid picture of just how deep his trouble is, what he feels like. Many bulls surround me. Like there's these bulls with horns circling him, ready to attack him, ready to run him down. Strong bulls of Bashan encircle me. Bashan was an area east of Israel where it was like plains, like open country, and lots of people had cattle. So you could maybe insert Alberta here. Many strong bulls of Alberta encircle me. If it helps you. Roaring lions tearing their prey, they open their mouths wide against me. He paints the picture, and you can see what David is doing here. He is intentionally stirring himself up. He is trying to get himself into a place where he can bring his deepest self bare and raw before the Lord. That's what he's doing on purpose. This is how you pray. Prayer is not just, it is asking God for things. But it's not just that. It's not just my list of, God, please do this for me. Please help my aunt. Please help my grandfather. Please help this person I know who's in trouble. It is that. But really it's this. It is stirring yourself up, waking up your own soul to bring it before the Lord. This is a way of dedicating yourself, making yourself holy to the Lord. And then he starts to talk about, you can already see connections between this and Jesus. And there's going to be some very explicit ones in a minute. You can already see that the idea where Jesus was on the cross, he's crying out because it looks like he's been abandoned. And now he starts to talk about the intensity of his suffering. And here, we're going to start to get to some stuff that David really didn't experience. Maybe some of this he did to some degree, but literally, he didn't experience all of this. But Jesus did. Jesus did. And so here he starts to move over into prophecy. As he reaches out to God, it's like the Spirit of God is speaking through him. I am poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax. It has melted away within me. That means he's not brave. This is David who faced down Goliath, and now he's terrified of everything, full of anxiety. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd. My tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. Now, right here, you start to see the specific connections to the story of Jesus. What happens to Jesus on the cross? There's a number of things that happen to him. But at one point, he asks for something. What does he ask for? Water. He asks for water. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd. My tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. And then this, of course, an indication, a hint that he's actually going to die. You lay me in the dust of death. So as David is entering into this deep worship, it's like the future. The salvation that's coming in the future is speaking by God's Spirit through him. Dogs surround me. A pack of villains have encircled me. What does it say next? They have pierced my hands and my feet. This is David just singing. He's just making up a song as he's playing his guitar and trying to seek after God with his deep pain 1,000 years before Christ. Did anyone ever pierce David's hands and feet? No, that never happened. Who did it happen to? Jesus. My bones are on display. Once again, I can't think of a time in David's life where his bones were on display, but what is every image of Jesus on the cross? What do you see? You see his ribs, right? Because he's been fasting. He's probably very thin, and he's been beaten all night, and he's literally strung up on a cross so that everyone can see his rib cage, his bones on display. And people are literally staring and gloating over him. And then this, they divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment. This specifically happens to Jesus. On the cross, you see the Roman soldiers, they're all excited, right? They're used to this. This is every day. They just kill people. They execute people. That's part of their job. And so one of the exciting things about being a Roman soldier is after you execute somebody, you get to take their stuff. Sweet. You get their stuff. And clothing was really expensive in the ancient world, and Jesus had a tunic that was all woven in one piece. Hey, that's probably worth like in our money, maybe like $500. Sweet. Well, they didn't want to rip it or cut it. because that'll wreck it. So they rolled dice to see who would get his tunic. And those who are watching this, his disciples watching this, I think it was probably the women first who noticed it. The disciples watching this remembered Psalm 22. And they said, wait a minute. I think David prophesied that was going to happen 1,000 years ago. A point you can write down in your notes is this, and we'll pick up Psalm 22 next week, but bring your pain to God, and he will give you the strength. Bring your real pain to God. This is how you pray. It's how you enter into true worship. The suffering of the afflicted one. One more verse. We'll come back to this next week. Just in this verse, in the second half of the psalm, it's like David in this prophetic moment, he starts to see, it's not just that all human beings are going to suffer, or even that he is. It's that someday there's going to be one human being who's going to suffer more than all others. And somehow that is going to be a really, really important thing in the history of the world. And it says, God has not despised or scorned the suffering of the afflicted one. He has not hidden his help from him, but has listened to his cry. He has not hidden his face from him, but has listened to his cry for help. Now it's important just because of the way he says it. There will be one who suffers so much that we would be right to call him the afflicted one, the man of suffering. Matthew 20, verse 28. We'll look at a few connections from the Gospel of Matthew here, and then we'll just look at the story of Jesus actually doing this same thing as David. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So just like David says, there's going to be this afflicted one who comes in the future. So Jesus predicted this many times about himself, that for some reason he was going to have to suffer and give up his own life. And somehow that is going to change the world. Jesus never fully lays out how. He never is really detailed about this is why there has to be this suffering and death. He just over and over says that this is the case, that he's going to suffer intensely, that he's going to die, and then that is going to change the world. In fact, in this verse he says it's going to be like a ransom. It's going to be like a payment that gets people out of prison somehow. Of course, this is in the Last Supper in Matthew 26. He took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." So somehow his blood, his suffering has to happen. He doesn't really say why here. He just says it has to be. His blood would be poured out, and for some reason that is going to result in the forgiveness of sins for many, many people. And after this Last Supper, at the end, they sing a hymn, they sing a worship song, and then they go to the Mount of Olives. You can write this down in your notes. The Bible isn't, there are answers to the question of why, but we're not going to go into those answers in detail today. But the Bible says to us over and over again, the Messiah had to die. There had to be, just like our ancestors knew that there had to be blood somehow to deal with the problem between human beings and heaven. The Bible tells us over and over that ultimately one person, one very special person, the Messiah, the anointed one, the afflicted one, would have to die in order to deal with sin. But once that happened, everything would change. And it has now changed. It has really changed. And so here's the image. This story in Matthew 26 of the Garden of Gethsemane, the Mount of Olives, and of Jesus himself doing this. We've sort of seen David do it. I've encouraged you to do it. And here's Jesus himself doing this same thing, bringing his deep pain, because it was not easy for him to go to the cross. I actually think it was quite easy for Jesus to die. It seems on the cross especially, he's able to, he chooses the moment he dies. Isn't that astonishing? There's a moment on the cross. It usually took people days or weeks to die on the cross. There's a moment where Jesus just decides, I'm going to die now. And he just dies. There were many moments in his life before that where he faced death and he didn't blink. Most of us are terrified by the idea of death. He faced it and he didn't blink. He didn't hesitate for a second. But there's something deeper going on at the cross, something that he is taking on that is really beyond what we can imagine. A kind of penalty, a kind of weight. All of that thing that our ancestors felt worldwide, that guilt, that deep, deep wrongness that they felt, that we can never fix it and somehow blood has to be spilled. That thing that they felt, that's what he takes on just himself. And so that's why he's terrified in this moment. He is struggling. You're going to see him. You probably know the story. Luke says he sweats blood while he prays in the garden. And this is how Matthew puts it and tells this story. He takes that deep pain and he brings it to his Father in heaven. That's how he deals with it. This is true prayer. Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to them, sit here while I go over there and pray. Now, even right there, this is stunning. He's going up on a mountain, onto the Mount of Olives, like he did regularly. His disciples probably, they'd heard him say stuff. They know tonight's a little different. Jesus is really upset, but this is also normal for them. Jesus is going to go up and pray all night. And what are the disciples going to do while Jesus prays all night? They're going to fall asleep. That's what they're going to do. This was also normal for them. Not on purpose, but they were unable to stay awake. I wonder if any of them recognized in the moment that Jesus, where they were going. There's a reason Jesus liked this garden on top of the Mount of Olives. Jesus was always seeing, it's almost like he saw in metaphors or something. He saw the meaning behind everything. He's on a Mount of Olives, right? So there's a garden up there with olive trees. Okay, what do olive trees produce? Olives. So you guys are on your game. Okay. And in the ancient world, what was the main thing they did with olives besides just eat them? They made oil. Yeah, that was the main source of oil, right? We do canola oil and all these other things. We also do olive oil. It was the main source of oil. Olive oil in the Old Testament is a symbol of what? Anybody know? It's a symbol of the Holy Spirit. The anointed one, the Christ, the Messiah, those words mean the anointed one. What would a person be anointed with in the ancient world? Olive oil. Olive oil. It was a symbol that they were the king, that God's hand was on them in some dramatic way. That's why that title, Messiah or Christ, is so important. He's the one person that somehow God has put his Spirit on, the oil, in a special way. But here's the thing. Jesus knew that in order for him to really become the Messiah, the one who would save the whole world, more was required than just a prayer. He went up on the Mount of Olives to the place where the olive oil comes from, the Spirit. And he went to a particular place on that mountain. He went to Gethsemane. Does anyone have a guess at what the word Gethsemane means? It means the olive press. The place where the olives are crushed and destroyed to bring the oil. Now you see what's in his head. He's going there because he knows that's his calling. He's going to be crushed so that thing that's covering the whole world with guilt and death can be removed. He goes willingly. He walks right into his deepest pain, and he goes after his Father. I think he knows he needs to be alone. He says to the disciples, you guys sit over there. I can't handle watching you fall asleep again. He says, Peter, James, and John, I've taken the three of you, that's the sons of Zebedee, or James and John. I've taken the three of you on like so many mountains. I think you guys can probably stay awake this time. You guys come with me. And he began to be sorrowful and troubled. And he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. So he asked them for help. The Son of God asks Peter, James, and John for help. Stay here and keep watch. That means stay awake and pray. Stay here and keep watch with me. Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground. This is the proskuneo, if you remember from a few weeks ago. He falls prostrate before his Father in heaven. And he said, my Father, if it's possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will. He returned to the disciples and found them sleeping. I can't imagine what kind of emotion were in the words that he says immediately following that. I think he really thought Peter and James and John would stick with him, at least this time. Although I think he also knew that it had been prophesied that he would be left completely alone in the moment of his greatest pain. He says to them, couldn't you stay awake for even just 1 hour? You can see he asked Peter. He looks Peter right in the eyes. Peter's supposed to be the best of them. Watch and pray so you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing. Look at how full of grace he is. I know you guys are trying to do the right thing. I know you're trying to seek God. I know it's just your flesh that's weak. The whole scene repeats itself 3 times. He went away a second time. He prays. You can see at this stage he knows now that it's not possible for this cup to be taken away. The cup meaning his suffering. He's going to drink the suffering. He says, if it can't be taken away, I will do it. When he came back, again, he found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. He didn't even wake them up this time. Doesn't even say anything. He just goes back to pray again. He prays, he went away once more and prayed the third time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to them and said, are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come. The Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let's go. Here comes my betrayer. As he brings all of his deepest pain to his Father, even though every single person, even Peter, even his closest friends, the people who are supposed to be there for him, even though they can't stay awake with him, he gains the strength. He does what David did. And we'll see David finish this next week on Easter Sunday, in the second half of Psalm 22. David walks through the deep darkness in that psalm, and he comes back up the other side filled with hope. Nothing has changed in his situation. Nothing has changed in Jesus' situation. But now he's ready. He's ready. Let's go. Let's go. Here comes my betrayer. And the final thing I'll leave you with is this. God is doing amazing things while most of us are sound asleep. Let's pray. We'll continue in worship.